I'm Hector Perez from Dev School. Welcome to this new graphical interface challenge in .NET MAUI, in which we're going to recreate the page that you can see on the screen. It's a login type page that looks quite good. It has elements like a background in the header, an animation that looks quite nice, sections for icons, and the use of different elements like different colors for each of the buttons. I hope you're excited about this tutorial, and if you are, remember to leave your like on the video and subscribe to support this channel. Now, let's get started. Well, I have already created a new project in Visual Studio to begin this graphical interface challenge, which is actually going to be a set of different graphical interface challenges in which we're going to create an application, not with all the functionality, but at least with the graphical interface part. We're going to link different pages so that they follow a sequence. This time, we're going to make the login type page. The first thing I'm going to do is create a new folder as part of this project. So let's add a new folder and let's call this folder views, for example. Now that we have created this new folder, let's create a new file that is going to be the file in which we're going to be creating the graphical interface. Let's select the .NET MAUI category, select that we want a content page, and let's call the page, for example, loginview.xaml. Let's wait for this page to be created. Once we have this page ready, what we're going to do is identify the sections of our login screen. For this, we return to the emulator and see that we have a top section that contains this background image, and we have a second section that contains the graphical interface controls. Let's start then by creating the main container for the entire application. For this, I'm going to remove the vertical stack layout that is created by default. Instead, we will create a grid with a pair of rows. The first row will have 0.3 asterisks, and the second will have a 0.7 asterisks. So, the first row will be the top row for the image element that is in the background, and the next row will be for positioning the different graphic interface controls. Once we have our first grid, the first thing I'm going to do is create the image that you can see as part of the application, this background image. Previously, I created an image with the appropriate dimensions. So what I'm going to proceed to do is to create a new image control with an aspect equal to aspect fill and a source equal to foot.png. I close the tag and I'm going to import this image that I am referencing in this line. I'm going to place this image in the resources folder. Here we have the images folder. I'm going to paste this image, and this is the one you can see in the preview. So now that we have this ready, so that we can see how the application looks like in the emulator, I will go to the file named app.xaml.cs to change the main page. In my case, the main page will be login view, which is the name of the class that is created as part of this page that we created. We indicate that we want to use the namespace for the folder we previously created. With the changes we have made, I select one of the emulators. Let's launch the application to see how what we're doing looks. After a few seconds, as the application was being compiled and run in the emulator, we can see that the image is now satisfactorily displayed as part of the application. If you have never worked with .NET MAUI and wonder why the image only covers this space at the top, it is because in this grid we created a pair of rows. The first with 30% space and the second with 70% space. What we are doing is indicating that this image will occupy the first row, which is the one with 30% of space. This is happening because we're not specifying a specific row where we have to position this image, and automatically these elements that don't have a row assignment are displaying as part of the first row of the grid. So in this first grid, once we've imported and are displaying the image correctly, the next step is to place a layer at the front of the image, so we can put a white text on the top of this layer with a specific opacity. How can we do this? Well, we're going to create a grid on this image we placed before. To do this, we're going to indicate that we want a background color equal to 4F, 3F, 9B. This color can be any color you like. I'm doing this because I'm going to use purple as one of the main colors of the application. Next, we're setting an opacity of 0.9, that is 90%. If we go back to the emulator, you can see we already have this nice layer showing at the front of the image, and it would allow us to place white color text on top of this layer. The next step is to divide this layer into two, so we can place the icon or the logo on the left and put the animation on the right. How do we accomplish this? Well, after the second grid we've created, we're going to create a new grid, allocating the column definitions property to create a pair of columns. These columns are going to have the same width, so we put asterisk, comma, asterisk. That ensures both have 50% space each. We're also going to add an image inside this grid. This image is going to be the logo. We're going to indicate that we want an aspect fit as part of the properties of this image. We also want to allocate a specific height, which will be 120 units. Finally, the source, or what is the name of the image, in my case will be applogo.png. I close this tag. I'm going to stop the execution, as this image that I'm specifying here I haven't imported yet as part of the project. That's what I'm going to do next. Again, I go to the folder called images, and here we already have this image called applogo.png, which is actually a white colored logo. I think you can see it a little bit. It's this logo that we can see here. With these changes that we have made, I'm going to start the execution of the application again, so that we can visualize the changes as we go making them. Once the application has been deployed, we can see the logo on the left side of the application, which indicates that everything is working correctly. The next step is to create the bottom part, as the animation we are going to leave for the end. We will focus on the bottom part to create the section where the graphical interface controls will be located. How can we do this? Well, we are going to go to the main grid, which appears at the top. And what I will do inside this grid that I've defined is to create a new grid. This grid will be located in position or row number 1, since we are going to occupy the space of the bottom part. The other controls have been positioned on the first row, but we want to position the second row already at the bottom. Once we have created this second container, we're going to indicate that we want a round rectangle control type to give us the bordered part, or give us the bordered control that we need to separate the top part from the bottom part. For this round rectangle, I will assign a margin of -5, -30, -5, -2. This is for the round rectangle to have a correct separation from the application borders or device borders. Next, I'm going to assign its corner radius a value of 30, 30, 0, 0. I'm doing this because I want only the top edges to be rounded. I'm not interested in rounding the bottom edges, and that's the reason for this specific assignment. Once I've done that, I'm going to specify a fill for this round rectangle, which will be white. Then I will close this tag to see how it's looking in the application. Okay, we can now see the round rectangle, which is part of the graphic interface with the specified rounding. We don't have rounding on the bottom edge because of the instruction we specified. Once we've created the round rectangle, we will create another container as part of the same grid, positioned over this first round rectangle. We could identify this round rectangle as the background of this page, and then we're going to create a vertical stack layout that will be the container for the graphical interface elements or controls. This vertical stack layout will have a margin of 30, 0, 30, 0. Now that the vertical stack layout is ready, we're going to start creating different controls to position them within this container. The first of these will be a control label. We assign some properties like font attributes equal to bold, font family also equal to bold, and font size equal to medium. The text will say welcome, and a text color of 2D, 2D, 2D. A gray appearance you can see on the screen. We are going to create a second control label that has a font family set to medium, and the text to login to continue, and a text color set to A3, A3, A4. I close this tag, and now that we have this pair of labels ready, let's review them on the emulator, and we have this graphic interface with these couple of elements or text displayed on the screen. One thing that is lacking here is importing fonts because we are specifying a font family set to bold and another set to medium. Thus, I will stop the application and I will go to the Solution Explorer. I will head to the Resources folder, and here we have the Fonts folder, where I will paste the fonts we will need. I've already imported the pair of fonts we're going to need. They are these two fonts, Lato Bold and Lato Regular. To register them as part of the application, we're going to go to MAUI program. As part of this section called Configure Fonts, I will proceed to add a couple of lines through fonts.add-font. We have to specify what the name of the font is, which in this case is latobold.ttf. I'm going to copy this name. Here we can specify an alias to use in XAML code. For this font, in my case, I'm going to specify the name as bold, or the alias to be equal to bold. I'm going to duplicate this line, change the name to Lato Regular, which is the name of the font, and change the alias to Regular. If I remember correctly, this is the name, not medium. We are going to change the name to medium. Once we have done this, we start the application again to see these changes in the application. Ready. After waiting a few seconds, we see that the font has already changed. We have a font that goes more in line with the application we are developing. The next step then is to recreate the part of the section of the icons you can see next to each of the text boxes. How can we achieve this effect? Well, we're going to go to create a container for each of the icons. Next, we will create a round rectangle for the background. Finally, we are going to use a font icon to assign which is the icon for each of these sections. Let's go to the XAML code, that is, to the loginview.xaml file. After the second label control, remember, we are going to position ourselves within the vertical stack layout. Within this vertical stack layout, I'm going to create a new grid. We assign a margin of 0, 30, 0, 0 to separate this grid from the last label control a bit. Next, we will indicate that we want to specify a couple of columns, the first one with 20% space, and the second one with the remaining 80% of space. Actually, this grid that we are defining here is going to be the grid that separates the icon from the graphical interface control. Inside this grid, I will proceed to create a control type round rectangle. Let's set its background color property to ED, EB, F6. Also a corner radius equal to 10. A height request equal to 60 units. Its horizontal options equal to center. Vertical options equal to center, and finally a width request equal to 60 units. If we close this tag, save the changes, and return to the emulator, you can see that we already have this new background color, or this section where the icon that we are going to create next is going to be located. The next step then, after the round rectangle, is to use the icon of the font. However, we have not imported this icon or this font that contains the icons yet. For this, let's return to our folder called Fonts. And I'm going to proceed to copy and paste the font, that is this font called Font Awesome Solid. To register this font and be able to use the icons, I go back to the mauiprogram.cs file. I'm going to duplicate one of these lines. I'm going to copy the name of the font. I'm going to replace the name of the font. Once I've done this, I'm simply going to assign an alias, for example, Awesome Solid. With what we've done, we can now use this font as part of our XAML file. Therefore, after the round rectangle that I have defined as part of the XAML file, I'm going to create a new image with its horizontal option set to center. There are different ways to use a font icon. In this case, I'm going to use an image. I'm going to specify a source for this image, and next I use a font image source element. Here we have to specify what is the font's family, that is, what the font's alias is, which in my case is Awesome Solid. Also the glyph, which will be equal to an ampersand symbol, a hash symbol, and then XF0E0. And a semicolon, a size equal to 44 units, a color equal to 4F, 3F, 9B. We close this tag, and if we return to the emulator, after a few seconds, we will have the application in the emulator, and we will have this beautiful icon which serves to represent the information that we will have to fill as part of the graphic interface. Once we have this code ready, we are going to proceed to create the entry control. For this, after this image control, I'm going to create a new entry control. I'm going to position it in column number 1. I place a placeholder equal to email, for example, a text equal to, for example, .NETBot@mauidelivery.com, and its vertical options equal to center. We close the tag, save the changes, and voila! We have this section of the first control. We have both the icon and the graphic interface control. To create the password control, all we will do is duplicate this section that we have previously defined. How can we do this? Well, we are going to take this whole grid, the grid found after the label control. I'm going to copy this code, paste it, and some changes I'm going to make are, first, I'm going to change the glyph to glyph F084. Also, as part of the entry control, this entry that we have here, instead of the placeholder equal to email, we will indicate that it will be equal to password. Similarly, to increase security, I'm going to assign a property called isPasswordIsTrue, so that it displays the control as asterisk instead of characters. Finally, we will change the text so that instead of an email address, the text is equal to 12345, for example. If we save the changes and return to the emulator, we can already see this new section for the password, which looks quite good. Let's now create the button section. To do this, after this grid that we have created, before the closing of the vertical stack layout, we're going to create a first button with a margin equal to 0, 20, 0, 0, a background color equal to 4F13F9B, a height request equal to 60 units, for example, and a text that says login. The text color will also be equal to FBF6FD. We close this tag, save the changes, and now we have this nice button that has good contrast with all the colors we have used up to this point. Now let's create a label control for the purpose of giving the user the option to recover their password if they've forgotten it. We're not going to build this functionality as part of this video. All we're going to do is create the control with a link appearance. To do this, we will create a label control with a margin of 0, 20, 0, -10. Let's set its horizontal options equal to center. The text will be equal to forgot your password. Let's set a text color equal to blue. The blue color will give it the appearance of a link. Lastly, we'll also assign its text decorations property equal to underline to represent a link. If we save the changes and go to the emulator, we now have this label that simulates the appearance of a tag or a URL to a different website. Let's create a final button after this label control. Next, write button with a margin equal to 0, 30, 0, 0. Then assign a background color equal to FB, F6, FT with a height request of 60 units. Let's assign the text create your account, meaning it's going to be a secondary button with a text color equal to 4F3F9B. If you close this tag, you can see that we now have this button which has a secondary color that isn't intrusive. The primary action is to click on the login button, and the secondary action is to click on this button to create a user account. Done! We now have the graphical interface. The only thing left is to create the animation for the upper part to give us a more dynamic interface. To achieve this goal, as part of the application's resources, specifically in the folder called raw, I will proceed to import a JSON file. It is this file called initialanimation.json. This is a Lottie animation. How can we start or how can we run a Lottie animation as part of .NET MAUI? Well, as part of the project, we will right-click, Manage NuGet Packages for this project. In the Browse section, we will look for a package through skia-sharp.extended.ui.maui. This will return this result that we can see on the screen. We have to click on Install to carry out the installation of the package. We accept the terms. In case the package doesn't appear, you have to click on this option to include pre-releases type packages. This package will install all the necessary packages to be able to work correctly with Lottie or Lottie animations. I'm going to close this tab. To use an animation as part of the graphical interface, as part of the namespaces, I'm going to create a new namespace through xmlns, call it for example Skia, which equals clr-namespace skia-sharp. We have this definition of this namespace, skia-sharp.extended.ui.controls, assembly equal to skia-sharp.extended.ui. This is the namespace that we need to use the control that will allow us to play a Lottie animation. Now that we are prepared to execute Lottie animations, we will search as part of our code the specific location where we will position this control. The location is inside this grid that has a few columns defined, but only one column has content assigned. Below this image control, I will try to use the SK Lottie view control, which is the control for running Lottie animations. Firstly, I will indicate that I want to position the control in column number 1. I want a height request equal to 100 units, and I will specify the repeat count property that helps to indicate how many times I want the animation to be executed. If we put a value -1, this will indicate to the control that we want to execute this animation indefinitely, therefore it's the value that I will use. We also have to specify which is the file that we want to use or which is the Lottie animation, which in my case is the file named initialanimation.json. I'm going to close this tag. I'm going to save the changes. And before starting the execution of the application to see how this control looks, there is a very important step, and it's to go to mauiprogram.cs. After this line of use MAUI app, we're going to add a new line equal to use skia-sharp, which in fact is available as part of IntelliSense. We select this option. We add the pair of parentheses. This automatically adds all the available namespaces or the namespaces that we need, which in this case is the one we see on screen. Once we have done this, let's start the execution of the application again. After a few seconds, the application has been deployed and we can see that we are correctly displaying the Lottie animation, which looks quite good. It gives a fresh air to the application, a vibe that there is dynamism on this page, and in conclusion, the application or this page look quite good. If you liked the video, I invite you to like the video. I also invite you to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you will be notified as soon as I upload a new video, either about graphical interface challenges with .NET MAUI or other technologies, or about development with .NET in general. See you in the next video.